I deal with this all the time with entrepreneurs when I do coaching. They're like, oh, I need to get my website up. Oh, I need to do all this fancy stuff before I can really start to do sales. I'm like, no. There's very successful businesses who hit 7 figures that don't even have a website yet. You don't. So I think it's easy for us to do all the busy stuff that's flashy and that makes us feel good, but that it really doesn't necessarily matter in actually moving the ball forward.
If you're an active real estate investor and you're looking to do larger deals, you're in the right place. We are going to go and take the conceptual type of stuff that you listen to from other real estate podcasts and bring it down to the tactical, the nitty gritty, the actual actionable types of things that other real estate investors that went big did to grow their own real estate empire. You're listening to the Go Big Live podcast. I'm your host, Matt Drouin. Hi, welcome everyone. I'm your host, Matt Drouin. Welcome to the Go Big Live Real Estate Investors podcast. And I have a very special guest today, and it is Dr. Sheri Fluellen. With over 21 years of experience as a therapist and coach, Dr. Sheri understands the unique struggles and aspirations of real estate investors. And as an investor herself, she has a unique perspective to the Go Big journey and knows how to successfully tackle the ups and downs of the industry. Join us as she shares her expertise on how to navigate the complex world of real estate investing, managing mindset challenges, and achieving lasting success. Whether you're a seasoned investor looking to enhance your strategies or a beginner seeking guidance, this is a valuable opportunity to learn from Dr. Sheri's wealth of knowledge, and you won't want to miss it, especially the live Q&A after the show, because I'm looking forward to that. So thank you for being on the show, Sheri.
Absolutely. Don't miss it. Just like Matt said.
Yeah. So I like to start the show with the first question. I keep it consistent across the board.
Yes.
You were born and now you're here. What happened in between?
A whole lot. I was born in a small town. I live in the smallest or the least populated state in the nation. So there's some continuity there in being able to pave my own way and not have to worry about a lot of people around me. I do love people, by the way, but just raising a family is great to do that when you're not, or at least my perspective is I don't want to raise kids. And I have 4, ages 12, 14, and 15. I did not want to raise them in the middle of a big city with crazy crime. I did not grow up that way, and I wanted to raise them in that way. So I live in Wyoming, which is fantastic. We love our freedom and our guns.
Yeah, let's take it a step forward here. Talk about your journey in terms of your background, professional background it's definitely been labeled like, okay, mental health, but also you're a high performance coach. So tell us how that sort of segues into how you help business owners and entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. So I graduated with my PhD in psychology back in 2007. I actually joined the military. So I was an Air Force psychologist for about 5 years. Great, gave me extremely good foundation to be able to continue on my work once I separated from the Air Force. Once I separated, I knew that I needed to be an entrepreneur because my perspective was I'm smart enough and I don't want to be controlled by other people. I want to pave my own destiny. So as soon as I separated from the military, I opened up a private practice, a mental health private practice, brick and mortar in the town I live in, and ran that for about 9 years. So about 5 years in, as I started to hire people for the first time, never done that before, I was like, oh crap, there's a lot of responsibility I have here running a business. And now I've got employees and I'm literally like the work that I do and I'm providing them is providing for multiple families. Mm-hmm. So I got to a point where I recognized the immense weight of responsibility on my shoulders. And I'm like, okay, I got to get better. I need to make sure that I'm doing this well. So I started on my own path of leadership development, which ended up being amazing. Absolutely loved it. And so through that process, as a psychologist, I was like, oh, I could do this for other people. So then I started to do executive coaching locally in my town while I also owned the practice and was growing myself. And I realized that when I walked away from an appointment or a session with one of the entrepreneurs that I was working with, I was excited. I had enthusiasm more than when I started the appointment, which gave me the recognition that, oh, maybe I should actually do more of that instead of just staying in the mental health field, doing evaluations, working with clients that have certain diagnoses. And so that was the light bulb moment for me that I pivoted or started to pivot anyway from traditional psychology, mental health work into coaching. And so then I ended up selling my practice and jumping full-time into coaching. So I don't diagnose anybody anymore. And I'm very excited to not have to do that, but I'm able to still use all that background and that knowledge and experience, understanding around behavior change to be able to support the high performance coaching that I do. And entrepreneurs and particularly real estate investors are like, that's who I am. That's how I think and live. And that's who I love to work with the most.
Absolutely. So let's talk about real estate because you're a real estate investor. What was your first, well, first of all, let's back up a little bit because it's a little bit strange for a PhD to get into the idiot's business, which is real estate investing, right? So what was that seminal moment where it was like, oh, I want to invest in real estate? And tell me about that.
So really it was the influence of my sister. She lives in Seattle. At the time, she was a computer programmer for Microsoft. When she moved to Seattle, I suppose this was probably 20 years ago, she bought a little fourplex. It was beat, or either threeplex or fourplex. I don't remember. It was beat up, but she moved into one unit. She fixed it up. She progressively fixed up the other units, raised the rents. And this is all before you could go on like Bigger Pockets and hear other people do this. So she was figuring it out and paving the way. And so then she told my husband and I, you guys should really get into investing, because she now was understanding the potential for the future and all these things. And she was so excited that she was constantly talking to my husband and I about it. And this is well before we had kids. And we were at the beginning stages of our own adulting journey. And by her encouragement, we're like, well, maybe. So we lived in Washington, D.C. for a year. We started going to some local meetups for the RIA there. And so we're like, okay, I think we could do this. So then we moved out to Wyoming in 2007. And within 1 month of moving here, we bought our first property ever. And that was our personal home. And then 3 months later, we bought our first investment property. And then we've just been consistently, boringly buying ever since. Sometimes the best journey is one that's consistent and boring. But there's been some exciting things. But honestly, the value of our portfolio and the privileged position we're in right now is because we just bought a few properties a year and just rented them out, did the boring thing.
Yeah. So this show is about talking about your first big deal or investor's first big deal. So tell us about the origin of that. Where was that sort of pivot? Maybe you were buying like small single family and small multifamily. Tell us about that journey in terms of like your first big deal and where it started.
Yeah. So it started as not a big deal, not a large deal, put it that way. So when I opened up my private practice, because I already knew real estate was the thing and was really important, immediately before I even opened the practice, we had bought a little house. It was like 1,100 square feet in the downtown area of the town I live in. And I bought that, turned it, petitioned with the city to get it rezoned, repurposed, was successful in that. And that's where I started out my private practice. I had the living room. I put doors on. I had the living room as my office. My first employee had a bedroom upstairs as his office. And that's how we functioned. And it worked really well. And as my practice grew, I bought the house next door. And then we outgrew those two places. And then I bought a historic mansion a couple blocks away. And then we outgrew there. And that's where I bought my largest purchase. It's actually still our largest purchase of a single property. And it was $883,000 is what the purchase price was on it. It used to be a children's clinic. So it was a medical facility. It is a little over 6,000 square feet, all one level, brick, and had been on the market for a while. And I identified, I'm like, ooh, this is perfect because my profession, we need a lot of rooms. And so it seemed like it would be a good deal. So once we saw that, we knew we needed to expand. We figured out how to make it happen.
Yeah. So where'd you find this deal? Was it on the MLS or was it on CoStar or LoopNet?
It was on the MLS. I don't remember if it was on CoStar or LoopNet. My husband is a real estate broker. By that point, he was a broker, and we were well aware of all the things coming on and off. And I've had a little bit of an addiction looking at properties that come on. I mean, it's fun. For me, it's fun to imagine what some of these properties could be or become. So it was on the MLS. I don't remember how long it had been on the MLS, but actually, I want to say, now that I'm thinking about the details, it actually was probably about 9 months it had been on the MLS. So it had been sitting there a while. It was vacant because the medical facility had already moved out, already on another location. And I remember being concerned about the zoning of the property because it had been vacant and it technically wasn't zoned for what they were using it for because the zoning had changed, but it could be grandfathered if it wasn't vacant for too long. So there was a little bit of that navigating.
Okay. And you said it was around 800,000 and change was the
Yes.
purchase price, right? Your
Yep.
intention was to purchase it for your business to occupy 100% of it?
Yes. Yes, 100% of it. And honestly, the only reason we were able to even consider that high of a purchase price for us at that point was because I was working with an SBA, a small business administration. They have this whole program with coaches that you can consult with for free. And they told me about the SBA loans and said, hey, this actually might be a good opportunity for you, which is available to buy property in which it's going to be occupied by you or by your business. And so I went through the process. It was a little bit painful, and just that any sort of bureaucratic thing has like miles and miles of paperwork, but it was 100% worth it. So we were able to buy it using an SBA backed loan. And the significant value to that is that we did not have to bring 25% to the table. At the time, SBA loans, we had to bring 10% to the table. And even that, I was able to have private lending on that as well. So out of my pocket or out of the profits of the business, we maybe 30 or 40,000 is what we had to pony up for the purchase and then the renovation afterwards.
Yeah. So let's talk about the capital stack here, right? So you had an $800,000 or so purchase. You had to bring in how much cash, including your own and your private lender, to the table?
So I think for closing the loan, we needed about 50 or 60,000. The bank did require us to collateralize 3 other properties that we had that had enough equity in it. And we still own this property today. Those 3 properties are still collateralized in that loan. And so there was that. And then there was about 100,000 afterwards for the renovation in order to bring it up, because it was like early 90s medical center, like not attractive. So we did a facelift on every surface.
Yeah. So about 30 to 40,000 of it was either through your business's cash, and then the rest of it was SBA financing. And then you mentioned something that you had to raise some capital to get this deal to renovate it as well, I believe, right?
Yes. Yeah. So in our sphere of influence, we reached out and were able to secure the rest of that money. So I suppose it was about maybe 125,000, 130,000 as a private loan on top of the SBA loan.
Okay. So how did that conversation pan out? I mean, were you talking to people about, hey, I'm in real estate. If you're looking to passively invest in it and we have an opportunity that we really like, would you like to learn how you can participate in it? Tell us about how that conversation happened.
Yeah. So this is back in 2016 is when we were in the process of buying this. I knew nothing about LP position, passive investing. I didn't know any of that. Like I know about it now, but back then that really wasn't a significant part of the conversation. At least in my world, maybe other parts of the real estate world, but I wasn't aware of that. So it was literally having that, oh crap moment. This is an amazing opportunity. I need this to expand my business. What am I going to do? And just out of desperation, who do I know that might have resources? And so it was a loan on a fixed percentage over, I don't remember, 15 years amortization. And so it's out of desperation. I just started calling people that I knew that might have sufficient funds that they would be willing to put into me. And so there needed to be some trust there. Anytime that we ask people for money, they need to be able to trust us. Otherwise, they probably won't. So I needed somebody that knew my real estate history, because at that point, we'd been investing for about 10 years. And so they knew that I had invested in multiple things. I had not lost money. I never went bankrupt, all of those sorts of things. So that was a critical factor in somebody saying, yeah, actually, I'm okay getting, I think it's 5%. On that money over time, and it's worked out well.
Wow. Do they have any more money to lend out to us?
Right?
I mean,
I've tapped into them multiple times. Yeah. So I think I have $500,000 now invested of their money in various things. So yeah, you got to ask. That's the thing though. You've got to ask. You won't ever know who actually has the money and who's willing unless you ask. And 5%, I mean, in nowadays terms, like that would be amazing. And so in my experience is asking the older generation who at this point are like, I just don't want to lose my money. They're not looking for a home run return. They just don't want to lose their money and they want a safe bet. And if you can present yourself as a safe bet, then that's a great position to be in.
Yeah. And what an incredible asset that you can provide people that are either near retirement or in retirement, because, people maybe in their 20s and 30s don't realize this, that might have their retirement portfolio, maybe 80 to 100% in stocks, right? Or mutual funds that are based on stocks. You have to start changing your asset allocation as you get older so that you have less volatility in your portfolio. So the unfortunate position that I hate to say older, but people that are getting close to retirement have to do is they have to change over more towards fixed income instruments and a lot of stuff out there. If you just do the research, if you looked at what the average fixed income is, I'm like, let's say a bond fund or a CD or whatever, it's like really not great at all. It barely keeps up with inflation. And plus it still has some volatility because if you study bonds, those things go up and down in value when the stock market goes up and down in value and interest rates go up and down in value. So if you can present a fixed rate of return that's much better than you get in the bank and also protected by somebody that they know and trust, and also plus backed by the real estate business, you can provide such an asset to them. I mean, I'm always like, it's always a big proponent of that because you can be a great asset.
Yeah. Yeah. So over the years, over the last, I guess, 6 years since that moment, there's been a couple people that we've repeatedly asked and they've invested in some of our deals just not as an equity partner, but as a debt partner, which has been great for us. And just over the last couple of years now, we've started to play around with other ways of partnering with people. But yeah, absolutely. I think that sometimes we think, well, nobody's going to be interested in just a low, simple return, but they're actually out there. You just have to ask the question.
Mm-hmm. So let's dig into this a little bit, right? So you made a call. What went from there? Did you hey, let's get together for coffee and talk about this? Did you present it to them over the phone? The idea of I still call it investing, even though they're lending to you. It's the same thing. Yes. It's the same thing.
Yes. At the time, they don't live near me. So it was all over the phone. I get a little bit anal about wanting to make sure I'm presenting myself or whatever it is I'm doing with the best light. I like to create a presentation. Make it look nice. I love Canva. Canva is my best friend.
Me too.
I've created a lot of presentations in Canva. I will even go to the bank. I still do this now. And I will give them a presentation, like a 8-page presentation on this is who we are as an investment company. And this is how we want to improve the community and all this sort of stuff. So I did that with this. And I said, here's the property, here's the plan, here's all of these sorts of things. And that was sufficient.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, you're better than I am. I mean, the first few deals that I did, it was like a simple, just straight up email, like a text email, no graphics or anything like that, but very high level in terms of what we were looking for, what we're going to do to the property, and also the pro formas and historical financials and all that stuff. So I think sometimes people overthink things as well. Do you think?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. If you're in a position where you really want to move in a direction, but you think, I deal with this all the time with entrepreneurs when I do coaching. They're like, oh, I need to get my website up. Oh, I need to do all this fancy stuff before I can really start to do sales. I'm like, no, there's very successful businesses who hit 7 figures that don't even have a website yet. You don't. So I think it's easy for us to do all the busy stuff that's flashy and that makes us feel good, but that it really doesn't necessarily matter in actually moving the ball forward. So as much as I love Canva, if that's holding you up because you don't know how to use it or you're not sure what to put in your thing, totally fine. Absolutely. I would suggest do what Matt did and just have that conversation. And then if they say, well, it sounds good, but I'd like some projections, I'd like some spreadsheets, then go do that. But you don't necessarily need that on the front end.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, people and this happens to myself. I don't want anybody to feel bad about themselves but I'm like, I can tend to manufacture artificial hurdles in front of myself to create busy work for myself so that I'm not doing the work that is actually going to be the one thing that drives all of the results. And if I'm looking at my business and I'm like, geez, I haven't gotten any new leads in the past couple of months. And I was like, oh, I look at my calendar. I'm like, okay, how many brokers did I call on every week? How many properties did I analyze? How many properties did I walk? How many brokers did I take out to lunch? And then I'm like, geez, I was slacking on that. And that's what drove the results. And the same thing with my students, like the ones that are in our program that are getting results very quickly, is those are the people that are putting in that necessary work. But it's the same thing, like, oh, I need my business card. It's no, you don't need a business card. You need to put in the freaking work.
Right. No, absolutely. Absolutely. It is so easy to get distracted by things that feel funner. Because growing a business, I don't know anybody. I've yet to meet somebody that said the entire journey of growing a business, of sales, of all of that stuff is always fun and exciting. There's always grunt work. There's something that your personality doesn't love to do that you are naturally going to want to avoid. And so one of two things need to happen in order to overcome that. One is you just need to be super self-aware, which often takes time to get there. Or two is you have somebody you can depend on that forces you to be self-aware. And that's where a great coach comes in, is they can help walk you through some of the things that you're doing during the week and how are you meeting your goals. They're not telling you what to do, but they help shine the spotlight on the areas that you are actually getting in the way of your best self and your path for success.
So let's bring this deal forward a little bit, right? So you closed on it. You had a pretty massive renovation project in front of you. Tell our audience about that and that process, and then what this deal is doing for you today and going forward into the future.
Yeah, so there's a lot of stories around the renovation itself. 6,000 square feet. I have a friend who's very well connected in town here, and he recommended a contractor. I'd gotten a couple bids. So I got a bid from this guy who was fairly new to town, but my friend had known him from like high school because he used to live in Wyoming. And so he gave me a bid. It was about, I think it was 100, 110, something like that, thousand. And so I was like, perfect, let's do it. And we purchased the property in January, and I think we opened for business in July. So about a 6-month renovation, which isn't bad. Everything was changed. We didn't really move many walls, but all the walls were painted, completely new flooring in a good medical facility. Every little office has a sink, has a counter, has all of that stuff. So we had to cap off all of the water supplies so that the people wouldn't be in a therapy room with this awkward sink in the corner. What's that about? So we had to do all of that sort of stuff. And there was some challenges through that process, but we ended up with a decent product. There's some annoyances today as I go in there and I'm like, oh, like the floor is shifting, like the LVT shifted a little bit and things like that. But you know what? It's good enough and it has worked. So that was in 2017. In 2019 is actually when I sold my business. And I didn't sell the property. I sold the intellectual property for the business, the website, all of that sort of stuff to somebody else that had their own business and had their own space. And so here I was now with 6,000 square feet of office space that I needed to figure out what to do with. So fortunately, there is a title company in town that was looking to move. And so they moved into about 2/3 of the building and did a beautiful renovation again on that property. But they paid for it. It was like, I don't know, $350,000 in renovation or so for that. They added a bathroom and they did all the things. They had a great general contractor that made sure that their side of the building met code for the city. And then we rented out the other side, and that other side has rented out a few different times to a few different businesses. It's about 1/3 of the square footage, but the title company, they've been around in town here for 3 decades. So they are an amazing, amazing tenant to have. And we expect them to still be there at whatever point in the future we decide to sell. We refinanced the property and pulled some of the equity out a couple of years ago. And it was priced at, I think it was 1.6 million is where it's at right now.
So where it appraised?
Yes. So it almost doubled from where we bought it. And we had 120,000 or so equity that we added to it, but we're pretty pleased with the growth in the appraisal.
Yeah. So this is the magic about commercial. And I do not just commercial multifamily, but I'm a big fan of commercial office, even office people these days. There's still a business for office. Retail, industrial is that you can buy a vacant building that everybody's scared to purchase. And you can add so much value by bringing tenants into this space. So this is how you were able to, let's say, $800,000. Let's just round it up to $1 million. You had it as a basis in this building, appraised for $1.6 million. And where can you get that in residential.
Right.
It's very hard to, but we do it all the time in commercial.
Yeah. Cause that's, what almost a 60% increase in 6 years. So that's pretty significant. And we just re-rented it again. So this will be our third tenant. And come full circle, it's a mental health clinic that is renting it. And there's some fancy singer guy that owns it, that's funding the business, who lives here, but I don't even know. I don't listen to that kind of music, so I'm not sure history, but it's cool. So we're getting some notoriety with the building and that new business that's going into that small part.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. What is that building cash flowing you per year now that you have the new debt on it?
So it's actually not cash flowing because we have maximized the amount of equity. And so when I look at just the debt that is attached either formally or informally to that building, it doesn't cash flow. But that equity has allowed us to buy multiple other buildings that is cash flowing. So really, it's looking at the whole portfolio and making sure the portfolio as a whole is performing. And every few months, I analyze the individual properties for return on equity, which is the equation that I love to use the most. But yeah, so it's been a pivotal part in launching the growth of our other properties.
Oh, Dr. Sheri, I have a ton of questions that are follow-up on that because that's super interesting because there's a huge debate about do you cash flow, equity, all that stuff. So I have these questions, but we're actually out of time. So we're going to wrap up the recorded version of the show right now and jump into our live Q&A because our live studio audience is patiently waiting for us. So that being said, if you are listening to this right now and you want to get in on live question and answer sessions with our amazing guests like Dr. Sheri, Gino Barbaro, Reed Goosens, Brian Burke, Stephen Libman, the list goes on and on. If you want direct access to them, definitely make sure to join our Go Big Live Real Estate Investors podcast on Facebook, and we'll catch you there on the next show. So thanks for joining us, Sheri. I appreciate it.
My privilege.